All right, everyone, the federal court just shot down Trump's legal case involved with the House subpoena. See, what they want to do is subpoena his financial records. And he said basically no, and he sued and said they don't have the ability to subpoena because no proper cause has actually been established for why they would need it. And so they're arguing, Trump's team, and they lost this argument in this particular court. They're going to appeal, but we'll see what happens. I expect the decision to be upheld unless it goes before SCOTUS itself. So they're appealing, so it's still on stay. They were arguing the U.S. House needs to establish some degree of reasonable cause before it can legitimately subpoena this material. Now, the judge ruled, of course, against the Trump team and said, no, Congress has constraints on its ability to investigate, but they're not substantial. Its ability to investigate is basically more or less nigh on limitless. That's true. I actually agree with this decision, inconvenient as though this may be for Trump, and hear me out with my reasoning. This is one of those weird legal gray areas where, constitutionally speaking, it isn't 100% clear that there is any particular limit on the U.S. House. What I would say is that for the sake of decency, and I know when we're talking about that in terms of politics, it's sort of like just being like, yeah, I'm a constitution. I understand that. It's not exactly the most pragmatic view, because it's never been the case. Like the abilities of political office, the various powers and privileges they enjoy have always been misused in various ways by various political entities, individuals, and parties, organizations, using them like puppets. That's always been the case. I understand that. But there's no specific constitutional constraint on their ability. Here's the problem. It's just like with impeachment. If you want to impeach the president or any other official, supposedly what you need to begin those proceedings is some sort of reason to do so. You have to have a reasonable suspicion of wrongdoing such that it can be further investigated and potentially lead to the resignation or removal of that individual. Essentially, they get a chance to resign before the vote happens. After that, they get kicked aside. Nixon resigned, of course. Clinton didn't because he just laughed it off. Technically, you should have a reason. You should have smoke in order to speculate that there's fire. But there's no actual constraint saying that you have to. And if you did, it would be totally arbitrary. Courts would have to arbitrate Congress and their decision-making. It would give disproportionate power to the judicial branch. Now, people on the right, who, largely are going to back Trump in this and say, well, he made the wrong decision, this is crazy. Do you want to give more power to the courts? Because that's how you give more power to the courts. Arguably, Trump wins by not winning this case in the long run. And by the way, let him subpoena his financial records. Who's going to force the President of the United States to divulge them? They're trying to get him through the U.S. Treasury. How are they going to force Mnuchin to do that? Trump can come out, and if they try to drag him into prison, he can defend him anyway. They'd just be seen as obstructions. It would be seen as almost like a coup if Congress were actually to attempt to drag before them in manacles people that are part of Trump's cabinet. It's probably not going to happen. The reason why they're trying to use the judiciary any way possible to arbitrate this is because they don't want to have to tell their fans that they ultimately, I don't think, are willing to do that. And as far as Trump goes, even if his financial right, let's say that the New York Times, pulls a Vice News, breaks into one of his mansions to grab his copies of his tax returns or something. I don't expect you'll find any wrongdoing. I think you'd see a very pissed off Trump rambling about how the IRS is going to go after his businesses even more, but ultimately I don't think you're going to find anything, able to be litigated in there. No, I don't think Trump's a tax cheat. I've never been given any evidence as to why anyone thinks that he's a tax cheat. They say, well, the numbers don't add up. You don't have the numbers. You have his financial disclosure. You were trying to say, well, Trump isn't as well off as he says because he only made, what was it, like $100 million in the fiscal year for the one partial release that he gave. And I'm like, that's income from rent from shit he's already built. That's a huge amount of money. You make $100 million year over year. Yes, eventually, if you're investing it properly, yeah, you'll probably be a billionaire. You do realize that basic math, right? That's not the only money he has. That's how much he made in a fucking single year. $100 million. You can't even begin to fathom the kind of wealth that is. And I think that was after taxes, if I remember correctly. I think that was his bottom line. I could be wrong on that, but I mean, it's still a huge amount of money. And look, yes, on paper he's going to have less in cash than many billions of dollars because most of his wealth is tied up in property ownership. That's how he gets continuing more money. This is the difference between The kind of rich and the super rich. The super rich take their wealth and they try to look for ways to grow it more. The just kind of rich just have wealth. You know, you're like, hey, you know, I've got a 6-figure income. I'm kind of wealthy. I get the sports cars. Okay, you're doing well in life. Donald Trump doesn't even have to do anything. He builds something and he lets it continue to generate revenue for the rest of the foreseeable future. And when he has enough money, he takes some of that wealth that he's amassing and invests it in something else. So the ultimate amount that he's making year over year keeps growing. That's the mentality of someone who becomes not just a millionaire, but a billionaire. Or in some case, you know, some people, technically the businesses they're managing, like Tim Cook or Bezos, they're worth $1 trillion now. We're moving to the point where we're going to have the world's first official trillionaire fairly soon. It'll probably be Bezos first. I wouldn't expect it at this point it'll be Bill Gates, although I think that he's still variously in the top 3 or 4, but I think Bezos is the wealthiest man in the world, isn't he? Or is it still that dude in Mexico who owns the phone company? Like he like basically every fucking phone in Latin America comes from his holdings, and he's like got unimaginable levels of wealth. Must be fun. He lives in an area where he can just hire cartels to go after his competitors. But here's the convolution of the case. The convolution is that yes, specifically speaking, rationally, in the context of the era of our founding, would they have expected that the House should have some reason to proceed to investigate someone? Yes, absolutely. Is there an official doctrine that states that they have to do that and they cannot be partisan? No. The same is true for impeachment. And this isn't just the case for the U.S. House. This would be similar in state houses all around the country. They can drag you in and question you. Yes, the U.S. House could subpoena me right now and force me to testify before Congress. They don't have to have a reason to do so. Any old partisan reason to force me to fly to D.C. will do. Should they? No. Would it be good optics? No. Would they have an easy time of making sure that they weren't, you know, basically smacked in the cock if they did so to a bunch of people, random citizens? No, it would be very difficult. But this is Trump. This is a hyper-partisan situation. Trump's approval is middling as far as his presidency goes. Better than it was, but it's ultimately middling. The Democrats don't technically lose anything by doing this. They shouldn't. They shouldn't legally be entitled to, but the only alternative is to give the judicial branch authority over congressional investigations. Considering that the President of the United States can appoint judges, that's probably not a good idea. And considering the fact that a partisan congressional makeup can affect the composition of SCOTUS, it's an even worse decision. So it's probably better to just let Congress be Animal House, which is pretty much what they act like sometimes. That's about all. Peace out.